trial began in Ellsworth today for the former campaign worker for a U.S. Senate candidate charged with theft by deception. Matthew McDonald is accused of stealing $225,000 from the late Max Linn from April to July of 2021.
Given this money under the guise of investing in cryptocurrency under Linn's name, court officials say Linn never saw the return of this money, with prosecutors alleging McDonald misused the funds. The jury heard from 6 witnesses today, ranging from those who worked with Linn and McDonald to the Bar Harbor MDI police who dealt with the case.
McDonald's bank records shown to the court revealed transfers of Linn's money were spent on sports betting, McDonald's personal expenses and own cryptocurrency wallet, and a kilt rental for his wedding. To avoid facing Linn directly, testimonies say McDonald went to the Bar Harbor police, handing in a USB that supposedly had the crypto before McDonald had liquidated the money.
In McDonald's defense, his attorney says McDonald does not have any formal education or training to be a financial advisor, often working for Linn without proper compensation, saying they never had a written contract about him investing Linn's money. Before that, the defense and prosecution delivered their opening arguments.
McDonald used Max Linn's money in such a way that made it unlikely that Max Linn would recover it. He frittered it all away, and to the extent he didn't lose it, he used it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is theft.
Now, in sum, you're going to hear a lot about investments made by Mr. McDonald, which proved unwise in hindsight. And maybe it doesn't feel good that Mr. McDonald is not more forthcoming about the investments he made and the mounting losses that he and Mr. Linn had taken. But those are not crimes, and they're not elements of the crime which the state has charged my client with.
McDonald's trial will continue tomorrow. Before passing away in December of 2021, Linn ran as a conservative independent in the 2020 Senate race to represent Maine.